Nothing could wipe the smile off Alan McLaughlin's face today. After months in the firing line over allegations of inflated salary packages and, of course, the beach pollution controversy, he was on the way out. The reason for his resignation after less than 5 years as the Water Board's managing director was the expiry of his contract. Though with the board copping so much criticism lately, it was inevitable there would be speculation over the reasons for his departure. Alan, the cynics might say you're getting out when the going gets tough.
I think the cynics might be looking back 5 years and say that I came in when the going was tough. It's been tough for the whole 5 years.
Mr McLaughlin entered the water industry as a teenager 43 years ago. Since then, he says he's come to know just about every waterway and roadway in New South Wales. In that time, there have been many changes, and while he claims most have been for the best, Mr McLaughlin admits he saw problems such as beach pollution coming a long time ago.
Yes, I think it was inevitable because of the great expansion in reticulation that took place in the early 70s when we had the backlog sewage program funded by the federal government. The emphasis then was on reticulation without worrying about upgrading treatment. The inevitable consequence is that when you get round to having to upgrade the treatment, things aren't too good.
In your mind, is there any real solution to this, Alan?
Money put into good, well-designed sewage treatment plants, and that's what we're doing.
15 applicants have been interviewed to find his replacement. An announcement is expected mid-next month.
It may have been -4 degrees outside, but after coming this far, the petition pushers weren't going to Parliament House with a dirty bus. Preparations complete, the long-running campaign for the frigates finally headed for the seat of power, hoping to provoke as much interest here as it did on the way to the capital.
Well, we had a young fellow doing some roadworks and he had his stop sign out. We pulled up right next to him and he's looking at the coach and saying, "Now, what's going on here?" Thinking to himself. So we opened the door and we asked him what was his problem. He said, "Some bugger's written all over him, mate." I said, yeah, it's for the frigates. Never heard of it, but good idea, he says, good idea. Great, terrific. With that, we had a laugh and closed the door and drove off and left him to it.
Special permission was received to park the signature bus where thousands would see it during the day. The unusual sight quickly attracted interest, one Canberran so entranced with the idea he added his own personal endorsement. Inside a committee room, the large contingent of politicians and civic leaders who travelled down with the bus had done their best to create a Newcastle equals frigates environment. Designed to be educational and enticing, the novelty captivated the national media. An invitation was given to all government ministers to view the display. Not surprisingly, Hunter members were quick to add their support.
But I think this has been a good finale to what has quite clearly, Ross, been one of the most effective community and regional undertakings, exercises, ever undertaken.
We haven't seen this kind of achievement before because too often in the past there's always been the tendency to look on the dismal side of things.
Unfortunately, Defence Minister Beazley was not in Canberra today and other high-ranking ministers were engaged in a pre-budget Economic Review Committee meeting. It was a surprise, therefore, when Paul Keating dropped by, apparently in little hurry to get away.
We're combining, putting the first system in there.
Mr Keating even fielded questions from the media, although the government's preferred option remained safely behind rhetoric.
Oh, well, it's the illustration of a community's attempt to demonstrate to the federal government that as a region it's serious about complex industrial work.
Has it done that for you?
Well, I mean, I think the expressions for and on behalf of the community by the representatives of the community here, I would take those to be sincere and genuine ones. But the project evaluation of this requires complexity beyond that, and that's broadly not in my field, but in others.
Do you think there's any real point to it, though, considering that the final committee recommendation was actually made yesterday?
There is always a point, I think, in making it clear that community attitudes are shifting to make Australia more competitive, and a willingness on the part of a community to make a region more competitive. There's always a point to that.
Perhaps prompted by the warm reception given Mr Keating, the Prime Minister himself took time out to endure some of the same gentle arm twisting.
Mrs Hawke has a wee drop. Yeah.
Let us know how you find it.
Unfortunately for the delegates, however, Mr Hawke was far more interested in pointing out an unfortunate forgery in the petition than listening to Newcastle sell itself.
What's that be, Hawke? Parliament House, Canberra.
I think someone's trying to give you a message.
Eh? Now, yeah. How many more like that in there?
Delegates stressed a softly approach today, wary of creating an impression of blackmailing the government, especially in the light of a Melbourne Herald article yesterday, which suggested Newcastle was holding Canberra to ransom to get the frigates.
It's a very dirty trick, actually, because they're trying to mobilise the Victorian parliamentarians to obviously try and win a project they think they now might lose.
The final act of the day was a theatrical ride down the Parliament House corridors for the petition to the office of Acting Speaker Leo McLaughlin, 2 Hunter school children given the honour of playing out the final seconds in the petition's usefulness. According to organisers, the Fill It In for the Frigates campaign has been a success. Certainly no minister here can now claim to not be fully aware of the support the Hunter is showing for AWS. However, whether that knowledge has any impact on the decision makers in the long run remains to be seen. In Canberra, Ross Hampton, NBN News.
Mr Draper is a marine engineer who launched his company 4 years ago, operating ferry services at Brisbane waters. He says his experience and research he's done in Scandinavia, the Mediterranean and the United States convinced him the project would be a success. He's looking for a large diesel turbine craft with water jets, capable of operating in a 4-metre swell and only stopped by gale-force wind or fog, travelling at 80 kilometres an hour between wave tops. The cost, $4.7 million. A crew of 5 could operate commuter runs with extra hospitality staff on board for tourist cruises such as conference groups. And Mr Draper says Newcastle Council has offered part of Queen's Wharf as a terminal.
The growing market here in the Hunter is tourism, in particular in the Hunter Valley, and the conference market's there, and we see the tourist transfer of that conference market as being the backbone of the daytime operations of this vessel. So she'll be spread out a little bit, the morning commuters to then the daytime tourist mode, and then commuters home of an evening, and then hopefully in the future the nighttime picture show boat home from Sydney.
Well, how long before your obvious enthusiasm for this project is brought to fruition? When will it start?
It can be up and operating from that next wharf within 12 months.
They may only be schoolboys, but there were no beg your pardons in the regional final of the University Rugby League. The Scone team in the blue and white strip had big raps after winning the regionals last year, but they were running backwards within 5 minutes when clever Terrace 5'8" Sean Langdon sneaked over in the corner. 10 minutes later, one of the tries of the match, with Captain Dickens setting up his prop, eventually got a pass to Fellows for the 4-pointer. The Scone players soaked up more pressure with huge prop Atkinson burrowing through, but eventually something had to crack. Despite a desperate fight back by Scone in the second half, with the half 5'8" combination of Daniels and Everly shining, the country players just couldn't get back into contention. Terrace is now bracketed with the top 8 schoolboy sides in the state and enters the University Shield quarter-finals for the first time in 5 years.
That's right. Well,
It's
Falcons
said to
obviously
be a
got to look at some
non-contact
defensive
sport. The kits like this in the National Basketball League have the top coaches wondering. Falcons coach Ken Cole says he fears the tough European style of play is growing in Australia, as little is being done to stop it.
There's a very physical element creeping into the play, and I've always had doubts as to the referee's abilities to handle it if it's allowed to become too physical out here.
Last weekend in Canberra, Falcons guard Peter Hill cocked this shoulder to the mouth, chipping a tooth and loosening others. Cannons forward Emery Atkinson stayed on the court, and Cole is fuming over what he called was a very lenient piece of referee.
Peter Hill did grab a few players and push them in the back, so
what are the boundaries? And
you might expect something like that to come back.
I've seen a couple of things this season that I thought in seasons past would have been disqualifying fouls. They haven't been, and I want to know if the rules have changed.
Cole says he has the support of most of the National League coaches and has called for the Referees Commission to take control and stamp out aggressive play.
Still on down
Peter
below.
Ryan,
There's players
NBN
in. There's a
News.
lot of feeling there with the players having put Kennedy.
Show County was resuming from a 4-month break when he outclassed his rivals in the $100,000 Golden Goblet size at Grafton on July the 13th.
He responds, Show County, and he's got the goblet, well and truly won. Show County is racing away from Lucky Diamond, and as they reach the lines, it's all Show County.
The 1,000 metres distance tomorrow will be in Show County's favour, and Gary Harley suggests that you put Patronise and Kraken back in with Show County for the trifecta, and for the daily double, Show County in the first leg and Regal Harry in the second. Racing down south tomorrow is at Sandown, and Gilda coupled with Moyston should return you a dividend for the daily double, while Gary likes Tin Woodman, Daring John and Dark Bow for the trifecta. The $100,000 Beaumont Park Silver 7 Series kicks off tomorrow with the heats of the $15,000 Silver Bullet and the AWA Cup. The second heat of the Silver Bullet is the first leg of the daily double, and Gary likes Peeler Star, and in the second leg Subtle Ostie, and in the trifecta on race 10, Subtle Ostie to beat Chariot's Gift and Irani Blade. Trotting in the region is at Cessnock tomorrow night, with Harlane Adios and Mistress Monique expected to fill the placings in the daily double, and in the trifecta the big man of racing suggests 4, 2 and 1, Mistress Monique to win from Dicey Dealer and Victor Dundee. Let's hope Gary's on the money.
Fearing the contract could be slipping away from Newcastle, Trades Hall Secretary Peter Barrack called a special meeting of union representatives for a coordinated approach to the federal government. A letter signed by as many unions as possible endorsing the AWS bid will be sent to Prime Minister Hawke next week. And in case words are not enough, Trades Hall is also making it very clear that a political decision against Newcastle will be repaid in kind.
We're talking about possibly a real political backlash, which would take us decades to recover from.
AWS too is drawing few punches as it sees a win possibly slipping away. Its top executives were in Newcastle again today to release a study which AWS says shows the Hunter deserves the frigates. 69% of people polled in the region had heard of the project, compared to only 9% at Williamstown in Victoria. Perhaps more significantly, twice as many Hunter residents said the project was very important to their region.
It shows in the other direction that it really is not a major issue in Williamstown or Victoria.
However, Amacon's managing director, coincidentally also in Newcastle today, was having none of that.
Well, I note that AWS actually paid for that survey, so I would question the credibility of the survey.
AWS also put the cat among the pigeons today by suggesting that if Amacon wins, a secret deal must have been done. Chairman Rolly Hoy says based on the selection criteria, AWS should be a certainty.
For a long time now, we've been told that the Germans would win, and we find that difficult to understand because people didn't know what we were going to offer.
I don't know of any secret agenda, and I assure you I would know if there was.
Marching for Peace, 300 people stirring memories of a moment in history they believe should never be forgotten.
We're commemorating the victims of the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 and saying we don't want that ever to happen again.
With a police escort, the Peace Forum marched through Hunter Street to City Hall. Waving banners and shouting slogans, they called for direct government action to stop any possibility of another Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
Close the bases, disarm the seas, and Hiroshima never, never again.
These young people are the mathematicians of the future. Representing 25 different schools, 220 students chosen from 5,000 who applied calculated their way through 2.5 hours of algebra, geometry and equations. But it's not just for good marks. $14,000 worth of computer equipment is the prize for the winning school. For Year 7 to Year 12 students, one exam paper was set, giving the brightest students the chance to compete with all age groups.
We are trying to raise the interest of secondary school students' interest in mathematics. Especially, we are emphasizing on two aspects. The first one is on the problem-solving approach, and the second one we are emphasizing on the team approach from the school.
Hill Tech isn't quite the same as Bonnie, Scotland, but the Hunter Valley members of the Royal Scottish Dance Society picked up their heels and their kilts as if they were in Edinburgh. 13,000 dancers worldwide celebrate the Society's birthday, and around 80 dancers took to the floor in Newcastle. The dances were sponsored, and in what the Society calls real aid, funds are to be donated to the Mater Hospital Oncology Unit. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The Northern Combined Canine Committee needed a bridge to link its show and exhibition areas. The 14th Field Squadron of Engineers needed some real-life bridge building practice. Both have now come to each other's aid. 70 Army reservists have spent the past 2 weekends building a 30-tonne timber bridge for nothing but the cost of materials. To the squadron, it means a peacetime opportunity to construct a bridge to wartime specifications. For the Canine Club, it means a saving of close to $30,000.
Well, we were pretty desperate because the obedience people were in a position where they couldn't cross the creek eventually, and we had to have a bridge.
Of course, the price tag for the services of the Army engineers means they're very much in demand. But the reservists can only donate their skills to community projects deemed to provide valuable training. The Army has overcome wet weather setbacks by working 17-hour days on this project. In the squadron leader's mind, there's no question they'll finish the task with true military precision.
We have to finish the bridge tonight. We can't come back next weekend. I know Ray wants to use the facility next weekend. We have 2 weekends to complete the job, and we will.
Days ago, this parkland was a waist-high jungle of lantana and bramble. Once the site of a thriving horse-drawn coach company, the land later became an eyesore on the otherwise picturesque town of Paterson. Enterprising locals realised an economical way around the problem was to enlist the free labour of weekend detainees. What you see now is a result of more than 150 man-hours of clearing, digging, mowing and raking.
They come out with 10 mowers and heaps of hose and mattocks, and they just go like a plague of locusts. They just clean everything.
How do you feel about doing this sort of work?
Oh, I don't mind it. I prefer doing this instead of being in jail full time.
Both tourists and locals will now have free access to the unique relics of Tucker Park. A shed once used to house a horse-drawn hearse and a historic grain store.
The transformation's been miraculous. We could never have achieved it by ourselves.
Successful, there's no doubt that we'll say...
Restricted the field to these two. Both will spend around $15 million trying to convince the federal government of their...
This morning, the Shadow Cabinet met with Cessnock Mayor Marie Callaghan and were briefed on the main problems facing Cessnock: poor roads and low incomes. Both were blamed on the Greiner government.
The Greiner approach is to take freight off rail and to force it onto the roads without making any decent level of additional funding available to the roads in this area. We've made a survey of how an ordinary family in this area would be hurt by the increased taxes and charges out of the Greiner government, and it shows they're behind $15 a week. And as the Lord Mayor pointed out, this is an area with a low income, 50% of the area, $9,000 a year or under. And an ordinary family in Cessnock is now $15 a week worse off because of the increased taxes and charges out of Mr Greiner's government.
And local unrest can only be a bonus for the opposition, claims Mr Carr.
I believe if there's an election on this coming weekend, we'd romp in Cessnock.
Mr Carr described the inquiry into Cessnock Council as a shabby attack by the local member, who, he said, ended up with egg all over his face. This afternoon, Shadow Ministers met Cessnock teachers and parents, Cessnock Family Support, members of Curry Community Centre and representatives of Abernethy Hostel Action Group. And local residents of Singleton, furious with a recent Commission of Inquiry approval of the Rex's Creek mine near the township, had an opportunity to lobby Tony Doyle, Shadow Minister for Planning, for his support.
The twin-engine Grumman Cougar was carrying 2 students and an instructor from the Cessnock Commercial Air Training Academy. The trio were on a night flying exercise when an engine failed at about 7 p.m. They wrestled the crippled aircraft to within a few kilometres of the runway and might have made it if the wing hadn't clipped a high-voltage power line. Local farmer Steve Jackson was first on the scene.
Well, I was sitting at the dining room table doing some bookwork and I heard an aircraft. We're in the circuit area here and we tend to hear a lot of aircraft, but this one was exceedingly low and I was going to shout out something to my wife, and then there was a very soft sound of a collision and the motor then stopped, and there were just then a couple of other slight bangs, thuds, more thuds than bangs. We came out and there was just a little pinpoint of light down here, so I was pretty certain that something had landed on the property.
Incredibly, all 3 crew members survived. Student Brian Croak and instructor Craig Gollage are in Royal Newcastle Hospital with lacerations and leg fractures. The third, student pilot Chris Holborn, is in Cessnock Hospital with facial injuries. He was able to reconstruct the moments immediately after the crash.
Afterwards, I looked to my left out the left-hand window, and the student passenger that was sitting behind me was out in front of the wing that was next to me. No idea how he got out there. And Craig Gollage, my instructor, who was with me at the time as well, he was in the right-hand seat and he had a broken ankle and couldn't get out of the airplane. So I helped him get out of the airplane and sort of get away from the wreckage. And you could see and smell the fuel was leaking out all over the place. There was quite a big risk of a fire. And I couldn't move Brian because Brian's leg was broken. And it had bone protruding from the skin, and it wouldn't have been a smart move. So,
Did you say much to each other at the time?
Actually, it was very calm. I expected to be much more yelling and screaming and no control type thing, but I was very pleased, in fact, to find out it didn't go that way at all.
Chris was due to graduate with a commercial pilot's licence next month. Now he says he's thinking seriously about his career. Accident investigators arrived early this morning to examine the wreckage and perhaps discover what caused the port engine to fail with such catastrophic results. The Grumman was purchased second-hand by the Academy from an owner in the United States. It was flown from America to Australia without incident and continued to perform for 6 months before this accident. The same plane was involved in an emergency landing at Rutherford Airfield 1 month ago. The drama was caused by nothing more than a faulty instrument light. Only 2 men were on board at the time, the same instructor and the same student pilot, who are now in Royal Newcastle Hospital. I'm Tom Hilston for NBN News.